Imagine you're in a conversation with someone else and neither of you know about the topic you're currently talking about. How do you think that would go? Dear fellow citizens of the world, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Nick. I'm a career coach, and on this channel, we talk about career, mindset, and personal growth. Today, we are talking about the innocence and curiosity you must bring to the table anytime you get into a conversation with somebody else. So what is a conversation? A conversation is an exchange of ideas between at least two people, which means two different perspectives, which means two ways to understand reality. Why? Because both parties have different backgrounds, geographical, social, professional backgrounds. Both parties also have different objectives, different ambition, a different vision, or different dreams. And both have different imperatives, which means they have different obligations, which usually are external obligations, like a family or a boss, for example. Okay, usually the best way to communicate is to stick to the facts because facts cannot really be argued. And in this case, it's easier for people to communicate efficiently and not get into a disagreement. However, in reality, you know that emotion is going to take over at some point during the conversation. So there is some things to do for you to understand the other person and the other person to understand you. Let's take a job interview, for example. It's you talking to the recruiter, to the HR manager, or the person in charge. None of you knows about each other's story. Of course, you study about the company a bit, and the other person read your resume, but that's pretty much it for now. And misunderstandings are bound to happen during this interview because none of you know the other person so well. In essence, you need to educate each other about your own stories. So where might misunderstandings occur in this conversation? For example, on your side, you misread the job description, have expectations that are not truly what's expected of you in this job. Or during the interview, you misunderstand the interviewer's questions. They ask you something and you actually answer something a bit different. Or on a larger scale, you misunderstand the company's vision, mission statement for the employees for the future. And therefore, you know at some point that your values don't necessarily match the company's values. Now, on the interviewer's side, they might misunderstand your experience, either because it was not so clear in your resume, or maybe you decided to embellish the reality a bit, and therefore their expectations and your reality also don't match. When they ask you a question, your answer might be confusing. You believe that your answer was clear. In reality, they don't understand what you say. They don't understand the way you're trying to convince them that you are the qualified person for the job or that you're trying to explain your experience. And finally, they might misunderstand you as a person, meaning your personality, who you truly are, because you're nervous and you don't really act the same way you would in your daily life. So you say things, you act in a way that is very different from who you truly are. And therefore you give a false image of your true self. And this is when a misunderstanding can also happen. So in any type of conversation, in this case for a job interview, it is both parties' responsibility to not stay clueless about the other person's perspective and stories. And how do we accomplish that? We can do three things to make sure misunderstandings can be diminished and reduced to their minimum. The first one is to ask questions, to probe, to understand better and understand more. And the way you do that, you use the 5 W's that we used in the previous video for answering behavioral interview questions. You use the 5 W's, which is who, when, where, what, why, and how, if you really want to understand the full process. You ask questions because you want to clarify things. You want to clarify doubts that you have in your mind and help you understand and put into perspective a situation that is not familiar with you. Now, the second one is asking people to repeat, either because they answer too quickly or they answer in a very confusing manner. You don't understand, make sure you ask the other person to repeat. Because if you don't, at this point, the conversation is going on and the other person assumes that you got everything that is said. From now on, the responsibility falls on you because the other person's talk and you agree, you nodded, and therefore they feel that you understand everything that they said. If you didn't, it's the right time to ask questions, because if you don't ask them to repeat now, a small gap or misunderstanding can be blown out of proportion later during the conversation. And the third way you can help reduce misunderstandings in any conversation is to give the other person's feedback. And feedback comes into different forms. The first one would be to acknowledge the persons when they are talking. So, you kind of nod your head. Okay. Oh, I see what you mean. Right. Okay, I see. This is a way for you to show the other persons that you are following them. Because if you sit down and give them a blank stare all along, it might be confusing for them to see if, number one, you understand, and number two, if they should continue speaking more. So by showing that you're here, present, by nodding, shaking your head, frowning, maybe you show them that they are actually making an impact on you. Giving feedback also means that you can rephrase what they say. So as they are talking and you're nodding or you're making some sound and signals with your body language, you can also say, also, I should be expected to work on Saturdays as well. Yes, you should be expected to work on Saturdays as well. By rephrasing what they say or repeating what they say, you are sure there's no misunderstanding. So from that point, you can make the decision you need to make with no doubts in your mind. So of course, the tips I just gave you are in an ideal world for an ideal situation and an ideal conversation. It might not or will not happen this way particularly. Don't expect the interviewer to follow these guidelines because one, they might not be aware of it. Second, they might not care because they are looking at many candidates per day and they don't really care about being so perfectly in tune with communication skills. But you cannot afford to not do it for yourself because you are trying to build up a bank of information, a bank of knowledge, and building a skill that will set you apart from many people in the future. You can reuse this knowledge, this information in your job search. Whatever you're learning now, you use it in the future. By following those guidelines for being a better communicator, you can clarify your own ideas and stories that sometimes might not come across as understandable or might not come across as clear and transparent enough. So this is the opportunity for you to question yourself and the way you usually tell your own story to make sure people understand you. And again, you are building a skill and a discipline that will greatly help you in the future to be a better communicator, get into better conversation, more meaningful conversations, and therefore, in this case, probably get you the job that you want. So what are the 3 takeaways from today's video? Number 1, communication is hard because we dive deep into the unknown. We don't understand where the other person comes from, what is their objective, what is their motive, and therefore that creates doubts, that creates confusion. As a result, it can create problems. Number 2, becoming a better communicator helps you accumulate and gain knowledge, skills, and expertise that will serve you greatly in the future as well. And number 3, at the end of the day, you are training a muscle. You are creating habits. Because you do it step by step, you are growing without even knowing it. And at the end of the day, you want to be the person who tried their best to make that communication process work. You don't want to be that person who didn't listen, who didn't explain their story transparently and clearly enough. So when you have done everything that you were supposed to do, you can move on to the next stage. So when was the last time you were in a conversation, an interview where either you or the other person was clueless about the other's perspective and decided to stay ignorant about it? What happened in the end, and how could you have made things different to make it a more fruitful and productive conversation? If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss 2 new videos each week about career mindset and personal growth, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Thank you for watching, and I see you again in our next video.